The stagecoach lurched violently as it crossed another deep rut in the dusty trail, throwing Clara Whitmore against the worn leather seat. She clutched her carpetbag tighter, feeling the weight of her teaching certificates and the few books she'd managed to bring from New York. The Arizona territory stretched endlessly before them through the small window, an alien landscape of red rocks and sparse vegetation that seemed to mock the verdant hills she'd left behind. "First time out west, miss?" the grizzled driver had asked when she'd boarded in Tucson 3 days ago. She'd nodded, not trusting her voice to betray the turmoil still churning in her chest. 6 months. It had been 6 months since Charles had stood before their families and friends to announce he was marrying another, a woman with a proper dowry and connections his merchant family deemed more suitable than a schoolteacher. Clara pressed her gloved hand to the window, watching the landscape blur past. She'd accepted the position teaching Apache and settler children in Fort Defiance without hesitation. The farther from New York's suffocating sympathy, the better. Let them whisper about poor Clara Whitmore, abandoned at the altar. She would forge a new life in this untamed land where her past couldn't follow. The escort of 4 cavalry soldiers rode alongside, their blue uniforms dark with sweat under the merciless sun. Sergeant McKenna, a weathered Irishman with kind eyes, had assured her they'd reach the fort by nightfall. "Nothing to worry about, Miss Whitmore. These parts have been quiet for months." But as the sun began its descent toward the jagged mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood orange, Clara noticed the soldiers growing restless. They checked their rifles more frequently, scanning the rocky outcroppings that bordered the trail. The attack came without warning. A rifle crack split the air, and Private Morrison tumbled from his horse with a cry. Suddenly, the rocks erupted with gunfire. Clara threw herself to the coach floor as bullets splintered the wood above her head. The horses screamed and reared, the coach tilting dangerously. "Bandits!" Sergeant McKenna shouted. "Harrison, get the coach moving! Peters, with me!" But there were too many. Clara counted at least a dozen riders descending from the rocks, their faces masked with bandanas. These weren't Apache raiders. Their horses and gear marked them as white outlaws, the kind who preyed on supply routes and passenger coaches. The driver whipped the horses frantically, but a bandit's bullet found him. He slumped forward, the reins slipping from his dead hands. The coach veered off the trail, bouncing over rocks and sagebrush. Clara grabbed for anything to hold on to as her world turned into a chaos of dust and terror. Another violent jolt, and the coach tipped. Clara's head struck the door frame, stars exploding across her vision. When the world stopped spinning, she found herself half thrown from the overturned coach, her dress torn and dusty. The shooting had stopped. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard horses approaching. Sergeant McKenna lay motionless nearby, his blue uniform dark with blood. The other soldiers were scattered like broken dolls across the desert floor. Well, what have we here?" a rough voice drawled. Clara looked up to see 3 bandits dismounting, their eyes gleaming with a predatory light that made her stomach clench with fresh terror. "Leave her," another bandit called from horseback. "We got the payroll from the strongbox. No time for complications. The Apache patrol from Fort Apache might have heard the shooting." The first bandit spat tobacco juice dangerously close to Clara's face. "Shame to leave such a pretty thing for the buzzards." They argued briefly before the mounted leader won out. Within minutes, the bandits had vanished into the gathering dusk, taking the horses and anything of value, leaving Clara alone with the dead. She struggled to her feet, her head swimming. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. Her carpetbag had been thrown clear in the crash, her precious books scattered across the sand. With shaking hands, she gathered what she could. Night was falling fast, and with it came the desert cold. Clara had heard stories. Travelers who died of heat by day could freeze by night. She needed shelter, water, anything. But in every direction stretched the same alien landscape, now painted in shadows that seemed to move and breathe. She chose a direction toward what looked like hills in the distance, and began walking. Her button boots, so practical for New York streets, sank into the sand with each step. Within an hour, blisters had formed. Within 2, she'd discarded her torn petticoat, using strips to wrap her bleeding feet. The moon rose, casting everything in silver and shadow. Every sound made her heart race. The call of an owl became a bandit returning. The rustle of a desert mouse became a rattlesnake. She'd never felt so alone, so utterly removed from everything she'd known. By dawn, Clara could barely stand. She'd found no water, no shelter. The sun rose like a furnace door opening, and she knew with terrible clarity that she would not survive another day. She collapsed in the shade of a towering saguaro cactus, her lips cracked, her throat burning. Through heat-blurred vision, she saw him. At first, she thought him a mirage, a figure materializing from the shimmering air. But as he drew closer, she saw he was real, an Apache warrior, tall and lean, moving across the desert as if born from it. His long black hair was bound back, his chest bare except for a leather vest. He carried a rifle with the easy familiarity of one who'd grown up armed. Clara tried to scream, but only a croak emerged. She'd heard the stories. Apache raiders who tortured their captives, especially women. Better to die here of thirst than fall into savage hands. She tried to crawl away, but her body wouldn't obey. The warrior stopped 10 feet away, studying her with eyes dark as obsidian. He spoke in Apache, words she couldn't understand, then switched to accented English. "White woman, you are far from your people." He approached slowly, as one might a wounded animal. Clara flinched when he knelt beside her, but his touch was surprisingly gentle as he lifted her chin, examining her sunburned face and glazed eyes. "The desert is eating you," he said simply. From a water skin at his side, he poured a small amount onto her lips. The water was warm, tasting of leather, but it was life itself. Clara grabbed for the skin with greedy hands, but he pulled it back. "Slow, or you will be sick." He gave her small sips, patience in every movement. When she could focus better, Clara studied her savior. Taza Redhawk, though she didn't know his name yet, appeared to be in his late 20s, with sharp cheekbones and a mouth that looked unused to smiling. Scars marked his arms and chest, each telling a story of survival in this harsh land. "Can you stand?" he asked. Clara tried, but her legs buckled. Without hesitation, he lifted her as if she weighed nothing. She wanted to protest, to maintain some dignity, but darkness was creeping at the edges of her vision again. "My things," she whispered, thinking of her scattered books. "Things do not matter if you are dead," he replied. Already walking, his horse waited patiently nearby, a painted mare that regarded Clara with intelligent eyes. Taza lifted her onto the animal's back, then swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist to hold her steady. And despite everything she'd been taught about propriety, Clara leaned back against his solid warmth. They rode for hours, climbing into hills she hadn't even known were there. The landscape changed from desert to pine forest, the air growing cooler and blessed with shade. Clara drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the steady rhythm of the horse and the strong arm keeping her from falling. She woke to voices, angry voices speaking in Apache. They'd arrived at a camp nestled in a hidden valley. Wickiups made of bent saplings and brush dotted the clearing, smoke rising from cooking fires. Women and children stared as Taza rode in with his unusual burden. An older man with gray-streaked hair and a face like weathered leather approached, gesturing angrily at Clara. Others gathered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Clara didn't need to understand the words to grasp the situation. She wasn't welcome here. Taza dismounted and lifted her down, but kept a protective hand on her arm as he argued with the elder. The discussion grew heated, with several warriors joining in, their voices rising. A woman pushed through the crowd, elderly but still straight-backed, with eyes that seemed to see through Clara's soul. She silenced the men with a sharp word, then approached Clara, circling her like a hunter examining prey. Finally, she spoke to Taza in rapid Apache, her tone leaving no room for argument. Taza's jaw tightened, but he nodded. What's happening?" Clara asked, her voice still raw. Taza looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw something like regret in his eyes. "You have been alone with me, unmarried woman, by our law. This brings shame unless you become my wife." The world tilted again, but this time it had nothing to do with heat or exhaustion. Clara stared at him, certain she'd misheard. That's absurd. I'm grateful for your help, but I'm a teacher. I have a position waiting at Fort Defiance. Fort Defiance is 3 days' ride from here, through hostile territory. You would not survive alone, and I cannot escort you without others. He gestured to the gathered crowd. Already they speak of impropriety. The elder says I must marry you or cast you out now. Cast me out? Clara looked at the faces surrounding them, some hostile, some merely curious, all waiting. Beyond the camp lay the wilderness that had nearly killed her. She had no supplies, no guide, no hope of finding her way. "I saved your life," Taza said quietly. "By our way. That makes me responsible for it, but I cannot keep you here unwed. The choice is yours. Become my wife, or I will give you water and point you toward the white settlement. What happens then?" He shrugged, the gesture speaking volumes. Clara's mind raced. This was madness. She'd come west to escape one failed engagement, only to be forced into marriage with a man whose name she didn't even know, but the alternative was death, slow and certain in the unforgiving desert. Her voice failed. The crowd pressed closer, waiting. The elder woman spoke again, her tone impatient. Taza translated. "She says the sun grows high. Decide now." Clara looked into his dark eyes, searching for cruelty or deception, but finding only a steady resolve. He'd saved her life when he could have ridden past. That had to count for something. "Your name," she whispered. "I don't even know your name." "Taza Redhawk," he replied. "And yours?" "Clara Whitmore." The name felt strange on her parched lips, like something from another life. He nodded once, then turned to address the crowd in Apache. Whatever he said caused a ripple of reaction, some approving nods, some muttered objections. The elder woman clapped her hands once, decisively, and the crowd began to disperse. "What did you tell them?" Clara asked. "That the white woman accepts." His eyes held hers. "That you will be my wife before the sun sets." And as simply as that, Clara Whitmore's fate was sealed. She'd left New York to escape the shame of a broken engagement, only to find herself bound by laws she didn't understand to a man she'd known for mere hours. The desert had taken everything from her, her escorts, her belongings, her carefully planned future. Now it would give her a new life, whether she wanted it or not. The wedding ceremony bore no resemblance to anything Clara had imagined in her girlhood dreams. No white dress, no church bells, no familiar faces offering congratulations. Instead, she stood in Taza's wickiup as the sun set, wearing a borrowed doeskin dress that smelled of smoke and sage. The elder woman, who she'd learned was named Cocheta, painted symbols on Clara's face with red ochre while speaking words Clara couldn't understand. Taza stood across from her, transformed from the desert warrior who'd saved her life. He wore ceremonial attire, a fringed shirt decorated with beadwork, his hair adorned with eagle feathers. In the flickering firelight, he looked both magnificent and utterly foreign to everything Clara had known. The ceremony was brief, witnessed by a handful of elders. They shared a cup of tiswin, the fermented corn drink burning Clara's throat. Cocheta bound their hands together with a strip of white deerskin, speaking what Clara assumed were blessings or warnings, perhaps both. When it was done, the witnesses departed without fanfare, leaving Clara alone with her new husband. They stood facing each other in the dim wickiup, the silence stretching between them like a chasm. Clara's hands trembled as she reached up to touch the paint on her face, wondering if this was all some fever dream. "You should rest," Taza said finally, gesturing to a pile of furs in the corner. "You are still weak from the desert." He moved to leave, but Clara found her voice. "Where are you going?" "To sleep outside. You need not fear. I will not touch you without your consent." His eyes met hers briefly. "This marriage is for your protection, nothing more." True to his word, Taza spent that night and many following ones sleeping under the stars, leaving Clara alone with her confusion and growing curiosity about this man who'd bound himself to a stranger. The next morning brought new challenges. Clara woke to find 3 Apache women standing over her, chattering rapidly. The youngest, barely older than Clara herself, smiled shyly and held out a water gourd. The other 2, middle-aged twins with matching skeptical expressions, seemed less welcoming. "I am Ayana," the young one said in careful English. "These are Nasha and Doba. We teach you." What followed was Clara's immersion into Apache life, a trial by fire that left her exhausted each night. The women showed her how to grind corn on stone metates until her arms ached, how to scrape hides until her fingers bled, how to gather mescal and prepare it for roasting. Every task came with criticism, mostly from Nasha and Doba, who delighted in pointing out her clumsy white woman ways. "Your hands are like a baby's," Nasha scoffed as Clara struggled to weave a basket. "Soft and useless." But Ayana remained kind, patiently demonstrating each skill and offering encouragement. "You learn quick," she would say, even when Clara knew it wasn't true. The men largely ignored her, though she felt their eyes following her movements through the camp. Only the children showed open curiosity, creeping close when she sat outside the wickiup, giggling when she attempted Apache words. Taza remained distant but watchful. Each morning he would check on her before departing with the other hunters. Each evening he would return, sometimes with game, always inquiring about her day in his formal, careful way. He taught her basic Apache phrases, correcting her pronunciation with infinite patience. One evening, perhaps 2 weeks after their marriage, Clara was struggling to start a cooking fire when Taza appeared beside her. "You hold the drill wrong," he said, kneeling next to her. "Like this." He positioned her hands correctly on the fire drill, his larger hands covering hers briefly. It was the first time he'd touched her since the ceremony, and Clara felt an unexpected jolt of warmth that had nothing to do with the hoped-for fire. "Why did you save me?" she asked suddenly. Taza continued working the drill, coaxing a thin stream of smoke from the tinder. "Would you prefer I had not?" "That's not an answer." He was quiet so long Clara thought he wouldn't respond. "Finally," he said, "my mother was Mexican, captured in a raid when she was young, made a slave. My father saw her trying to escape, dying of thirst in the desert. He could have let her die or taken her to trade. Instead, he saved her. Later, she became his wife." He glanced at Clara. "Sometimes the desert brings unexpected gifts." The fire caught, orange flames dancing to life. Taza sat back on his heels, watching Clara's face in the firelight. "Is that what I am? A gift?" "You are a complication," he said, but there was something almost like humor in his voice, but perhaps not an unwelcome one. That night, when a late spring storm rolled through the mountains, Taza appeared at the wickiup entrance, soaked from rain. "The storm is strong," Clara said unnecessarily, watching him hesitate at the threshold of his own home. "I have slept in worse. Don't be foolish." She moved aside, making space. "This is your home." He entered reluctantly, settling as far from her as the small space allowed. They lay in the darkness, listening to rain pound against the hide covering, achingly aware of each other's presence. "Tell me about your family," Clara said softly. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, his voice came through the darkness, low and measured. "Dead, all dead." The words held a weight that made Clara's chest tighten. 5 winters ago, soldiers came to our winter camp. We had done nothing. We were at peace, had signed their papers. But they came anyway. Clara held her breath, afraid to interrupt. My father tried to talk. He knew some English, thought he could make them understand. They shot him first. My mother ran from my young sister, Paloma. She was only 7 winters. The soldiers, his voice roughened. They did not care that they were women and children. "Taza, I'm so sorry. I was hunting with others. We saw the smoke, rode back fast. Too late, I found them among the others." Paloma still held her corn-husk doll. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Without thinking, she reached out in the darkness, finding his hand. He stiffened but didn't pull away. Is that why your people stay hidden here? Some of us would rather die free in these mountains than live on our knees on their reservation. His fingers tightened around hers briefly. Now sleep. Tomorrow Kosheta tests your bread-making. But sleep eluded Clara for hours. She lay thinking about the man beside her. This complicated warrior who spoke of death with such pain, yet had shown her nothing but patience and protection. As days turned to weeks, Clara found her place in the camp's rhythm. Her Apache vocabulary grew, though she suspected the children taught her inappropriate words. Given the adults' reactions, she learned to read the sky for weather, to know which plants healed and which harmed. Not everyone accepted her presence. Kuruk, a warrior close to Taza's age, watched her with open suspicion. His wife, Elu, was among the most hostile, often speaking rapidly in Apache when Clara passed, the tone leaving no doubt about the nature of her comments. "She says you make Taza weak," Ayana translated reluctantly one day. "That a white wife brings white soldiers." The accusation stung because Clara feared it might be true. What if the army came looking for her? What if her presence brought destruction to these people who'd taken her in? However, reluctantly. These fears seemed confirmed when a runner arrived one afternoon, speaking urgently with the elders. Clara caught enough words to understand. Soldiers had been seen 2 valleys over, asking questions about a missing white woman. That night, Taza came to the wickiup earlier than usual. "We must talk," he said. Clara's stomach clenched. "The soldiers, they're looking for me?" "Yes, the elders meet tonight to decide. Some say we should move camp deeper into the mountains. Others say—" He paused. "Others say you should give me to them." "That will not happen." The fierceness in his voice surprised her. "You are my wife. I protect what is mine. I'm not truly your wife, Taza. We both know this marriage was just what?" He moved closer, his dark eyes intense. "Words spoken before witnesses, bonds made before the spirits. You wear the marks of an Apache wife. You sleep in my wickiup, work alongside our women. What makes a marriage true in your world that is absent in mine?" Clara had no answer. In New York, she would have spoken of love, of choosing each other freely. But hadn't Taza chosen to save her? And hadn't she chosen survival? Chosen to trust him with her life? "I don't want to bring danger to your people," she said softly. "Danger comes whether we invite it or not. My family learned this." He reached out, tucking a strand of her sun-bleached hair behind her ear. "But perhaps some things are worth the risk." The meeting that night was heated. Clara couldn't follow the rapid Apache, but she recognized her name, saw the gestures toward her. Taza argued passionately, supported by some, opposed by others. Kuruk was among the most vocal opponents, his voice rising until Kosheta silenced him with a sharp word. Finally, the old woman stood, her decision final. The camp would not move. Clara would not be surrendered. But precautions would be taken. Scouts would watch for soldiers. And Clara would learn to hide if needed. "Why?" Clara asked Kosheta later, through Ayana's translation. "Why protect me?" The old woman studied her with those penetrating eyes. "The spirits brought you here. Who are we to question their purposes? Besides," a slight smile creased her weathered face, "I have not seen Taza so awakened since his family died. Perhaps you are medicine for him, even if you do not know it yet." That night, another storm rolled through. This time, when Taza appeared at the entrance, Clara simply moved aside, making room. They lay side by side, careful not to touch, but the distance between them felt charged with possibility. "Thank you," Clara whispered, "for defending me." "You are surprised I would protect my wife. Your wife in name only." He turned toward her in the darkness. "Is that what you wish, to remain wife in name only?" Clara's heart pounded. She thought of Charles, of the humiliation and betrayal that had driven her west. But Taza was nothing like Charles. He'd shown her honor, protection, patience, asking nothing in return. "I don't know what I wish," she admitted. "Everything here is so different from what I knew. Different is not always wrong." "No," she agreed. "Not always." They fell asleep to the sound of rain, the space between them somehow smaller than before. The test came sooner than expected. Clara was gathering herbs with Ayanna when they heard the warning whistle. Soldiers approaching. Ayanna grabbed Clara's arm, pulling her toward a hidden cave they'd prepared. "Wait," Clara protested. "Let me talk to them. Maybe I can—" "No, Taza says you hide. Come!" From the cave's mouth, Clara watched a squad of cavalry enter the camp. Her heart sank as she recognized the uniform of Fort Defiance. These men had likely been sent specifically to find her. The soldiers spoke with several warriors, their leader showing clear frustration at the language barrier. Then she saw Kuruk step forward, gesturing toward the hills where she hid. Clara's blood ran cold. He was betraying her location. But Taza appeared, placing himself between Kuruk and the soldiers. Words were exchanged, Kuruk's angry, Taza's deadly calm. Then Kuruk made a fatal mistake. He shoved Taza, clearly challenging him before the watching soldiers. What followed was brief and decisive. Taza moved like lightning, his knife appearing and disappearing so fast Clara barely saw it. Kuruk staggered back, clutching his arm where blood seeped between his fingers. Wounded, but not killed. A clear message. The soldiers, perhaps deciding they wanted no part in tribal disputes, mounted up and left without further questions. Clara remained hidden until full darkness. When Ayanna came to fetch her, she found Taza sitting by their fire, cleaning his knife. Without thinking, she knelt beside him, taking his face in her hands. "You could have been killed," she said. "Kuruk challenged me before witnesses. I had no choice." He covered one of her hands with his. "Are you angry? He is one of my people. And you—" Clara silenced him by pressing her lips to his, a brief, impulsive kiss that surprised them both. When she pulled back, Taza's eyes were wide with shock. "I'm beginning to think I know exactly where I belong," she said. That night, when the camp was quiet and the fire had died to embers, Taza didn't leave for his usual place under the stars. Instead, he lay beside Clara, their hands finding each other in the darkness. It wasn't the passionate coupling of her imagination, but something quieter, deeper, a promise of possibilities yet to come. Outside, the night birds called to each other across the canyon. Inside the wickiup, Clara felt the first stirrings of something she'd thought lost forever. Hope for a future she'd never imagined but might learn to want. The first child who fell ill was little Nayeli, barely 4 winters old. Her mother brought her to Clara in desperation, having heard whispers that the white woman knew strange medicine. Clara looked at the feverish child, her heart sinking. She was no doctor, but she recognized the symptoms, likely influenza, something that could devastate a population with no immunity. "Please," the mother begged in broken English. "You help?" Clara couldn't refuse those pleading eyes. She did what she remembered from tending sick students back east: cool cloths for fever, honey and herbs for the cough, constant sips of water. She showed the mother how to prop Nayeli up to ease her breathing, how to make a tent of blankets and steam to help clear congestion. Word spread. Soon, other mothers appeared at the wickiup, bringing sick children. Clara worked tirelessly, teaching basic nursing care, boiling water for cleanliness, making willow bark tea for fever. Ayanna became her assistant, translating instructions and learning eagerly. "Where did you learn this?" Ayanna asked, watching Clara carefully measure dried elderberries for another remedy. "My mother was often called to tend sick neighbors. I learned by watching." Clara didn't mention that her mother had also died of influenza. Despite all their careful nursing, some truths were too painful to share. Even Kosheda observed with interest, occasionally nodding approval or suggesting local plants that might help. The old medicine woman and the young teacher found common ground in their desire to heal. Not everyone appreciated Clara's efforts. Elu confronted her one morning while she was gathering medicinal herbs. "You bring white sickness." Elu spat. "First you come, then children fall ill. The spirits punish us for harboring you." "These illnesses existed before I arrived," Clara replied steadily in her improving Apache. "I'm trying to help." "Help?" Elu stepped closer, her face twisted with anger. "Like white soldiers helped my sister? Like white teachers helped at the reservation school, cutting hair and beating children who spoke our words?" Clara felt the weight of crime she hadn't committed but whose stain she carried by birth. "I'm not them. You are white. It is the same." That evening, Clara found Taza repairing hunting gear outside their wickiup. She sat beside him, needing his steady presence after Elu's confrontation. "She's not wrong to hate me," Clara said quietly. "My people have done terrible things to yours." Taza continued working, his hands sure on the bowstring he was replacing. "My mother faced the same hatred when she first came. Mexican raiders had killed many of our people. But my father said wisdom means seeing the individual, not just the tribe they come from." "Was your mother happy here?" A rare smile touched his lips. "She said the mountains sang to her in ways the desert never had. She learned our ways, but kept some of her own. The women learned to make her spiced chocolate. She taught them Mexican weaving patterns." He glanced at Clara. "Change is not always evil." The hunting party left before dawn the next day. Clara had grown accustomed to Taza's absences, but this time felt different. He'd held her longer than usual the night before, his lips brushing her forehead in an uncharacteristic display of affection. "Be careful," she'd whispered. "Always," he'd replied, but something in his eyes suggested concern. The second day of his absence, the reason for worry became clear. One of the hunters returned early, supported between two others, an arrow shaft protruding from his shoulder. But it wasn't Apache fletching. "Yavapai!" the wounded man gasped. "War party. They ambushed us near Crystal Creek." Clara's blood ran cold. "Where's Taza?" "Fighting. He and 6 others hold them at the narrow canyon. He sent us for help." The camp erupted into controlled chaos. Warriors grabbed weapons. Women prepared medical supplies. Clara moved to join the women, but Cocheta stopped her. "You ride," the old woman said. "Take medicines. You know healing they need." It was unheard of. A woman, especially a white woman, riding with the war party. But Cocheta's word was law. Someone thrust a bag of medical supplies into Clara's hands, and before she could fully process what was happening, she was mounted on Taza's paint mare, riding hard toward Crystal Creek. The rescue party found the battle still raging. Taza and his hunters had taken position among the rocks, but they were outnumbered. Clara could see at least 2 Apache warriors down, blood staining the sandy ground. As the reinforcements engaged, Clara slipped from her horse, medical bag in hand. She crawled to the first wounded man, a young warrior named Bidseal with a deep gash across his ribs. Working with desperate efficiency, she packed the wound with clean cloth and herbs, binding it tight. An arrow whistled past her head, striking the rock beside her. Clara flattened herself, heart hammering, then forced herself to continue. This was different from tending sick children in the safety of camp. This was chaos, blood, the screams of wounded men and war cries echoing off canyon walls. She reached the second wounded Apache, Kla, one of the elder's sons, bleeding heavily from a thigh wound. The arrow had struck near a major vessel. Clara worked frantically, applying pressure, trying to stem the flow. "Behind you!" someone shouted in Apache. Clara turned to see a Yavapai warrior bearing down on her. War club raised. She had no weapon, nowhere to run. Then Taza was there, intercepting the attack with savage efficiency. The 2 men grappled, rolling dangerously close to the canyon edge. Clara watched in terror as they fought, unable to help, unable to look away. Taza was strong, but his opponent was larger, and they were evenly matched. Then the Yavapai made a mistake, overextending on a swing. Taza used his momentum against him, sending him over the cliff edge with a cry that seemed to hang in the air forever. Taza turned to Clara. blood running from a cut above his eye. His expression a mix of fury and fear. "You should not be here. Cocheta sent me. Your wounded need—" Another wave of Yavapai attacked, cutting off conversation. Clara bent back to her work, trusting Taza and the others to protect her while she fought her own battle against death. The skirmish felt eternal but probably lasted less than an hour. Finally, the Yavapai retreated, their war chief among the fallen. The Apache had held, but at a cost. 2 dead, 5 wounded, including Taza, who'd taken a knife wound to his side he'd hidden until the fighting ended. "It's nothing," he insisted as Clara examined the wound back at camp. "It's deep," she countered, cleaning it with water she'd boiled. "You're lucky it missed anything vital." He caught her hand as she worked, stilling her movements. "You rode into battle. No white woman would do this. No Apache woman would have married a stranger to survive either." Clara replied, "Perhaps we're both more than what we seem." He studied her face, his dark eyes intense. "When I saw that warrior coming for you—" His jaw tightened. "I have already lost too much. I could not lose you too." The admission hung between them, weighted with meaning. Clara continued tending his wound, but her hands trembled slightly. That night, as Taza lay recovering, fevered from his wounds, he spoke in broken words, sometimes Apache, sometimes English. Clara stayed beside him, cooling his fever, listening to his delirious ramblings about his family, about her. "Clara," he murmured at one point, his hand finding hers. "My star in darkness. Did not expect, did not want to care." She held his hand tighter, her heart aching with understanding. Neither of them had expected this, to find connection born from necessity transforming into something deeper. By morning his fever had broken. He woke to find Clara still beside him, exhausted but watchful. "You stayed," he said, voice rough. "Where else would I go?" she asked softly. "My place is here." The grateful families of the warriors she'd helped to save began leaving gifts at their wickiup. Beaded moccasins, choice cuts of meat, beautiful pottery. Even some who'd been hostile before offered nods of acknowledgement. Clara had shed blood for the band, had risked her life for Apache warriors. She was no longer just the white woman Taza had married from obligation. But it was a conversation with Kuruk that surprised her most. His arm still bore the scar from Taza's knife, but he approached her one evening as she worked on improving her basket weaving. "I was wrong," he said simply in Apache. "You have the heart of a warrior, if not the body of one." Clara looked up, startled. "I was terrified the entire time. Only fools feel no fear in battle. Warriors act despite fear." He paused. "I apologize for trying to betray you. It was without honor." After he left, Clara sat in thoughtful silence. Acceptance, when it came, arrived in unexpected ways. The monsoon season brought different challenges. The summer rains turned the desert valleys into rushing torrents, trapping the band in the high country. But it also brought unexpected beauty, wildflowers carpeting the meadows, the scent of wet pine and earth. One evening, Taza found Clara sitting outside their wickiup, watching lightning dance across the distant peaks. "Come," he said, extending his hand. "I want to show you something." He led her up a winding path to a ledge she'd never seen before. From here, they could see for miles, the storm passing over the desert below, shafts of rain turning gold in the setting sun. "My father brought my mother here after they married," Taza said. "He said it was where earth and sky met, where 2 different worlds could become one." Clara understood the metaphor. They stood together, Apache warrior and Eastern teacher, watching the storm that was both violent and beautiful, destructive and life-giving. "I dream of you," Taza said suddenly. "Even before the desert brought you, I dreamed of pale hair and kind hands. The medicine woman said I dreamed my destiny." He turned to her. "I do not know if I believe in destiny, but I believe in choice, and I choose you, Clara. Not from obligation, not from law, but because my spirit calls to yours." Clara felt tears on her cheeks, tasting of rain and salt. "I never thought I'd love again, After Charles betrayed me, I thought my heart was too broken. She reached up to touch his face. But you've shown me a different kind of love. Patient, protective, proven in actions rather than pretty words. Then you will be my wife truly, not just for Apache law or white propriety, but because you wish it? Yes, Clara whispered. Yes, I wish it. Lightning illuminated them as Taza drew her close, his kiss different from that first tentative touch. This was claiming and surrender both, promise and fulfillment. The storm crashed around them, but Clara felt only warmth, only the solid strength of the man who'd saved her in more ways than one. When they returned to camp, something had shifted. Perhaps it showed in how they moved together, or the light in their eyes. Kosheda smiled knowingly, and even Elu offered a grudging nod. That night in their wickiup, with rain drumming on the hide walls, they became husband and wife in truth. Taza was gentle, reverent, treating her body like the sacred gift it was. Clara discovered passion she'd never imagined, wild and free as the mountains themselves. Afterward, they lay entwined, listening to the storm. Clara traced the scars on Taza's chest, each one a story of survival. No regrets? He asked. Clara thought of the schoolhouse in Fort Defiance where she was supposed to be teaching, of the life she'd planned that had nothing to do with Apache camps and warrior husbands. No regrets, she said, meaning it. The desert took everything I thought I wanted and gave me everything I needed. You sound like an Apache woman. Taza said with a smile in his voice. Maybe I am. Clara replied, maybe I always was, and just needed to find my way home. The storm passed, leaving the night clear and star-filled. Through the smoke hole above, Clara could see the constellation the Apache called Where the World Turns. She'd learned so much in these mountains, about healing, about surviving, about love that grew slowly but surely like desert flowers after rain. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The soldiers hadn't given up searching. Winter would come with its own hardships. The delicate balance of accepting her place among the Apache remained a daily negotiation. But tonight, held safe in Taza's arms, Clara felt complete. She'd traveled across a continent to escape heartbreak, only to find her heart reborn in the most unexpected place. The teacher had become the student. The rescued had become the healer. The stranger had become beloved. In the distance, a mountain lion called to its mate, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. Clara smiled, understanding the wildness of that cry in ways the proper young woman from New York never could have imagined. She was Clara Whitmore still, but she was also something more. Wife of Taza Redhawk, adopted daughter of the mountains, keeper of both worlds in her transformed heart. The autumn moon hung full and bright as the band gathered for the harvest ceremony. Clara had learned that this was one of the most sacred times for the Apache, when they gave thanks for the piñon nuts, acorns, and mezcal that would sustain them through winter. She worked alongside the women, her hands now calloused and capable, preparing the feast. Your bread is better, Ayana observed, sampling the flatbread Clara had made. Almost Apache now. Clara smiled at the gentle teasing. Her early attempts had been disasters. Too thick, too thin, burnt or doughy. But 3 months of daily practice had worked their magic. The ceremony began at sunset with drums and singing. Clara sat with the women, watching Taza join the warriors in the sacred dances. Firelight played across his body, painted with symbols she now understood. Protection, strength, gratitude. When their eyes met across the fire, the heat she felt had nothing to do with the flames. Later, as the formal ceremonies gave way to social dancing, Taza appeared at her side. Dance with me, he said, extending his hand. I don't know the steps, Clara protested. Then I will teach you. He led her into the circle of dancers, his hands guiding her movements. The steps were complex, but Taza was patient, and soon Clara found the rhythm. Around them, other couples moved in the ancient patterns, and for a moment Clara felt the centuries collapse. How many generations had danced like this under these same stars? When the dance ended, they were both breathless. Taza pulled her aside, away from the crowd. "What is it?" Clara asked, seeing something intense in his expression. "The scouts report more soldiers in the valleys. Many more. They establish a new fort 2 days' ride from here." His jaw tightened. "They search for you still, but also they plan to force all Apache onto reservations. The free days grow short." Clara felt cold despite the warm night. "What will we do?" "Fight, hide, survive. What we have always done." He cupped her face gently. "But you, Clara, you could go to them. Tell them you were held captive, that you escaped. You could return to your world." "My world?" Clara pulled back, stung. "This is my world. You are my world. I would not see you suffer for choosing me. The winters here are harsh. If the soldiers come—" Clara silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her conviction into the contact. When she pulled back, she saw tears in his eyes, something she'd never seen before. "I made my choice on a storm-lit mountain," she said firmly. "I choose you. Choose this life, every day. Stop trying to save me from myself." He held her close then, and she felt him tremble slightly. This warrior who faced death without flinching was undone by her loyalty. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. A Mexican trader named Joaquin arrived with his pack mules, one of the few outsiders the band dealt with. He brought news from the settlements along with trade goods. "Señora Clara," he said, eyes widening when he saw her. "But there are posters in every town. The army searches for you. They say Apache kidnapped a white teacher." Clara felt Taza tense beside her, but she stepped forward calmly. "As you can see, I'm, well, not kidnapped, but married." She indicated Taza. "This is my husband." Joaquin's weathered face showed no judgment, only curiosity. "The reward is substantial, Señora. Many would betray your location for such money." "But not you," Clara said, reading the honesty in his eyes. "Not I," he agreed. "I have traded with these people for 20 years. They deal fairly, unlike many in the settlements." He paused. "But others will come. The army grows desperate to show they control these lands." That night, the band's council met late into the night. Clara wasn't permitted to attend, but she could hear the raised voices, the debate raging. When Taza finally returned to their wickiup, his face was grim. "We moved deeper into the mountains," he said. "To the winter camps early. Some wanted to surrender you to avoid conflict, but Kosheda and others argued against it. And you, I said I would die before I let them take you." He lay beside her, pulling her close. "But I fear that day may come. The world shrinks around us. Clara, the white man's hunger for land is endless." Clara heard the despair in his voice and held him tighter. "Then we face it together, whatever comes." The move to winter camp was arduous. Clara had thought she'd grown strong, but the steep mountain paths tested her limits. She walked when the trail was too treacherous to ride, her feet finding purchase on paths that seemed impossible. Taza stayed close, steadying her when needed, pride evident in his eyes when she managed difficult passages alone. The winter camp sat in a hidden valley, protected by towering peaks and accessible only through a narrow canyon that could be easily defended. Ancient ruins dotted the cliff sides, remnants of the old ones who'd lived here centuries before. "Safe," Kosheda pronounced, surveying their new home. "The soldiers will not find us here." But safety was relative. Winter came early and hard, blanketing the mountains in snow. Clara learned new survival skills: how to preserve meat in the cold, how to keep the wickiup warm with minimal fuel, how to repair winter clothing with sinew and hide. One bitterly cold night, huddled together under every blanket they owned, Clara felt the quickening in her belly she'd been suspecting for weeks. She took Taza's hand and placed it on her stomach. "What troubles you?" he asked, concern in his voice. "Nothing troubles me," she said softly. "But I think we've created a new life." Taza went very still. His hand spread across her belly, warm and protective. "You carry my child?" "Our child," Clara corrected. "Are you happy?" In answer, he kissed her deeply, then moved down to press his lips to her stomach. whispering words in Apache she recognized as prayers of thanksgiving. "I thought the line of Red Hawk would die with me," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You give me hope I had forgotten to feel." The pregnancy changed things. The women, even Elu, became protective of Clara. Kosheta began teaching her the birthing medicines, the ceremonies for ensuring a healthy child. Taza became almost comically careful with her, trying to prevent her from any work he deemed too strenuous. "I'm pregnant, not broken," Clara protested one morning when he tried to stop her from hauling water. "Apache women are strong," he said, "but you are also strong." Clara interrupted. "Or have you forgotten who rode into battle to save your stubborn hide?" He smiled then, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "I forget nothing about you, wife, how you looked that day, fierce as any warrior. How you look now, growing round with my child. You are more beautiful than the sunrise." Such tender words from her taciturn husband made Clara's heart swell. She pulled him close, marveling at how completely this man and this life had claimed her. But their mountain sanctuary couldn't protect them from all dangers. A late winter hunting party returned with grave news. Soldiers had found the autumn camp, had read the signs of recent habitation. "They have Apache scouts with them," the lead hunter reported. "Turncoats from the reservation. They will find the trail eventually." The band doubled their watches, but tension grew with each passing day. Clara noticed Taza checking his weapons more frequently, noticed the way he watched the canyon entrance. One night, unable to sleep, Clara found him standing guard on a high ledge. "You're afraid," she said, joining him. "I fear nothing for myself," he replied. "But for you, for our child, yes, I fear." "Tell me about your vision for our child," Clara said, trying to distract him from dark thoughts. Taza was quiet for a moment. "I see a child who knows both worlds, who can read your books but also read the wind, who speaks Apache and English with equal skill. A bridge between peoples, perhaps. And if the soldiers come before this bridge can be built, then we run. Mexico, perhaps, or deeper into mountains where no white man goes." He pulled her against him. "I will not let them cage us on their reservation. I will not let our child grow up forbidden to speak Apache, to practice our ways." Clara thought of the stories she'd heard about reservation schools, where children were beaten for speaking their native language, where they were forced to cut their hair and abandon their culture. She placed a protective hand over her growing belly. "We'll keep our child safe," she promised, "both of us." As winter slowly gave way to spring, Clara felt the child growing stronger within her. The band celebrated the pregnancy with quiet joy. New life was always precious, but especially now when their way of life faced such threats. Taza built a cradle board in the traditional way, decorating it with symbols of protection and strength. Clara sewed tiny clothes, combining Apache patterns with Eastern techniques. The other women shared their pregnancy wisdom, their birthing stories, preparing her for what was to come. One warm spring evening, as wildflowers began dotting the meadows, Taza took Clara back to their storm-watching ledge. The desert spread below them, painted in purples and gold by the setting sun. "Beautiful," Clara murmured. "Yes." Taza agreed, but he was looking at her, not the view. She leaned into him, feeling the baby kick. "Do you ever regret saving me that day in the desert? Do you regret being saved?" "Never," Clara said firmly, "though I sometimes wonder who truly saved whom." Taza's hand joined hers on her belly. "We saved each other, perhaps, the warrior who had forgotten how to hope and the teacher who needed to learn new lessons." They sat in comfortable silence, watching night claim the land. In the distance, a coyote called to the rising moon. Clara thought about the woman she'd been, heartbroken, running from humiliation, certain her life was over. That woman felt like a stranger now. "I love you," she said suddenly. She'd said it before, but each time felt like a gift. "Not because you saved me, not because Apache law made me your wife, but because you've shown me who I really am." "And who are you? Clara Red Hawk?" he asked, using her married name. "I'm a woman who chose love over safety, who chose mountains over mansions, Who chose a warrior's heart over society's approval? She turned to face him. I'm the woman who will bear your children and stand beside you whether we face soldiers or starvation or whatever else this shrinking world throws at us. Taza kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Clara tasted promises too profound for words. When they finally returned to camp, walking hand in hand, the stars were bright overhead, Apache stars over an Apache woman. No matter where she'd been born, that night, as they lay together in their wickiup, the baby kicked strongly enough for Taza to feel it clearly. His face lit with wonder, and he began singing softly in Apache, a father's welcoming song for an unborn child. Clara closed her eyes, letting the ancient melody wash over her. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. The soldiers still searched. The world still pressed in on the free Apache. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of a man who taught her that love could bloom even in the harshest desert, carrying a child who would know both worlds but be diminished by neither. The fire crackled low, casting dancing shadows on the wickiup walls. Outside, an owl called, and the wind sang through the pines. Clara smiled, one hand on her belly, the other entwined with Taza's. She'd come west to teach, and had learned the greatest lesson of all. Home wasn't a place, but a choice. And she chose this man, this life, this love that had transformed her from a proper Eastern lady into something wild and free and utterly, completely alive. The morning they came for her started like any other. Clara was teaching some of the children basic English words when the warning whistle echoed through the canyon. But this time was different. The whistle came from multiple directions, and with it, the thunder of many horses. "Clara!" Ayana burst into view, eyes wild with panic. "Soldiers! Too many! They surround us!" Clara's heart plummeted. Her hand went instinctively to her swollen belly where the baby kicked, as if sensing danger. She grabbed her medicine bag and the small bundle she'd prepared for this eventuality, her teaching certificate, a daguerreotype of her parents, Taza's mother's silver cross. The camp erupted in chaos. Warriors grabbed weapons while women gathered children. But Clara could see the truth in their faces. They were vastly outnumbered. Taza appeared at her side, his face grim. "The canyon is blocked. They came at dawn, quiet as shadows." He gripped her shoulders. "Listen to me. When they take you—" "No," Clara pulled away. "We run together or not at all." "Clara," his voice held such pain. "Our child needs to live. You need to live. Tell them you are captive. Tell them—" The first soldiers appeared at the camp's edge, rifles raised. Clara recognized the lieutenant leading them, Lieutenant Morrison from Fort Defiance. She'd met him briefly at a social gathering before her ill-fated journey west. "Mrs. Whitmore," Morrison called out. "Thank God we found you. Step away from the savages, ma'am. You're safe now." Clara stepped forward, but not toward the soldiers. She placed herself firmly beside Taza, chin raised. "Lieutenant Morrison, you're mistaken. I'm not a captive. This is my husband." The soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Morrison's face darkened. "Ma'am, you've clearly been traumatized. These heathens have corrupted your mind. Step aside now, and we'll get you proper help. The only help I need is for you to leave us in peace." Clara's voice rang clear across the camp. "I am here by choice. I am married by Apache law and my own free will." "Apache law?" Morrison spat. "That's no law civilized people recognize. Sergeant, retrieve Mrs. Whitmore." "Her name is Clara Redhawk," Taza said, stepping protectively in front of her. His English was heavily accented but clear. "She is my wife. She carries my child." A ripple of disgust passed through the soldiers. Clara heard muttered words. "Squaw. Race traitor. Abomination. Even worse than we thought." Morrison said coldly, "Sergeant, arrest that savage for kidnapping and defilement of a white woman. Use whatever force necessary." What happened next seemed to unfold in horrible slow motion. The sergeant moved forward. Taza pushed Clara behind him. Other Apache warriors stepped forward, hands on weapons. For a moment, the morning teetered on the edge of massacre. Then Cocheta's voice rang out, a sharp command in Apache. The warriors lowered their weapons, though their faces showed the cost of such restraint. "No!" Clara cried, understanding. "Don't surrender! Fight!" But Taza turned to her, his eyes holding a lifetime of love and sorrow. "If we fight, all die. You die. Baby dies. This way, hope lives." The soldiers moved in, rough hands separating Clara from Taza. She fought them, clawing and kicking despite her pregnant state, screaming his name. It took 3 soldiers to drag her away while others bound Taza's hands with iron shackles. "Animals," Morrison said with satisfaction. "The lot of them. Burn the camp. These creatures won't be needing it where they're going." "No!" Clara broke free for a moment, trying to reach Taza, but a soldier backhanded her across the face. She tasted blood, saw stars. "Careful with her," Morrison ordered. "She's a white woman, even if she's forgotten it. The baby, though," he shrugged. "Half-breed bastards rarely survive anyway." They dragged Clara to a wagon, her last sight of the camp showing flames beginning to lick at the wickiups. The children were crying. Ayanna reached out to her before a soldier shoved her back. And Taza's eyes never left hers until they forced him to his knees, and she could see him no more. The journey to Fort Defiance was a nightmare. Clara was kept in the wagon, wrists bound for her own safety. Morrison claimed she watched in helpless fury as the Apache prisoners, her family now, were forced to walk behind the mounted soldiers. The pace was brutal. The elderly began to stumble. When old Nantan fell, a soldier prodded him with a rifle butt until he struggled back to his feet. "Please," Clara begged Morrison when they stopped to rest the horses. "Let me tend the injured. I have medical knowledge. You'll have no further contact with these savages." Morrison replied curtly, "It's for your own good, Mrs. Whitmore. The sooner you remember who and what you are, the better." "I know exactly who I am," Clara said through gritted teeth. "I am the wife of Taza Redhawk. I carry his child. And when word of your treatment reaches—" "Reaches who?" Morrison laughed. "No one cares what happens to a few renegade Apaches. As for you, well, temporary insanity brought on by your ordeal explains everything. Don't worry. We'll have you back to civilization soon enough." Clara saw Taza among the prisoners. Blood dried on his face from where they'd beaten him for initially resisting. Their eyes met across the distance. He mouthed something in Apache. "Be strong." Fort Defiance loomed before them at sunset on the second day. Clara had once thought it looked like safety, like civilization. Now it looked like a prison. They separated her from the Apache prisoners immediately. Clara was taken to the commander's house while the Apache, including Taza, were herded toward the stockade. "No!" Clara fought against the soldiers holding her. "Where are you taking them? Taza!" Her answer came in the form of a laudanum-soaked cloth pressed over her nose and mouth. The world went dark. She woke in a clean bed, wearing a white nightgown she didn't recognize. Her wrists bore bruises from the bonds, and her whole body ached. A woman sat beside the bed, Mrs. Colonel Patterson, the commander's wife. "Oh, good, you're awake." "Mrs." Patterson said with false brightness. "You gave us quite a fright, dear, but don't worry. You're safe now. That horrible ordeal is over." "Where's my husband?" Clara's throat was raw from screaming. "Mrs." Patterson's face pinched. "Now, dear, you mustn't speak of such things. It's not healthy. The savage who abducted you is in custody, awaiting trial." "Trial for what? He saved my life." "Saved?" "Mrs." Patterson's laugh was brittle. "My dear child, he kidnapped you, held you prisoner, forced himself upon you. Look at your condition, but don't worry. There are ways to handle such situations." The implication sent ice through Clara's veins. "If anyone harms my baby, I'll—" "Threats. Clara, really? You're not yourself. The doctor says it's common in these cases. The mind creates fantasies to cope with trauma. But with rest and proper treatment, you'll recover. You'll forget this whole sordid affair." Clara realized arguing was futile. These people had already written her story for her. She was the victim, Taza the villain, and nothing she said would change their minds. "I want to write to my family," Clara said carefully. "They should know I'm alive." "Mrs." Patterson brightened. "Of course, I'll bring writing materials. I'm sure they'll be so relieved to know you're safe." But when the materials arrived, Clara found her letters were to be reviewed for disturbing content. Her first attempt, telling the truth, was confiscated. Her second, begging for legal help, met the same fate. "You're upset, dear," Mrs. Patterson said. "Perhaps it's better if I write to them for you." Clara was kept under constant watch. They called it protective custody, but she knew better. She was a prisoner as surely as Taza was. The windows were locked. A guard stood outside her door. When she demanded to see Taza, to know his fate, they sedated her again. Days blurred together. Clara heard snippets from the guards. The Apache prisoners were to be sent to the San Carlos reservation, hundreds of miles away. All except Taza. He was to be tried for kidnapping, assault, and crimes against nature. "It's a hanging offense," she heard one guard tell another. "Attacking a white woman like that. Colonel wants to make an example." Clara's desperation grew. Her baby kicked constantly, as if sensing her distress. She had to find a way out, had to save Taza. But how? Her chance came from an unexpected source. Private Williams, one of the younger guards, had a sister who died in childbirth. He'd watched Clara with something like sympathy when she walked the small garden they allowed her for health. "Please," Clara said to him one day, making sure they were alone. "I need to know when the trial is. He's my husband, the father of my child. Whatever you've been told, I love him." Williams looked away. "Tomorrow morning. Colonel wants it done quick, before any bleeding hearts in Washington can interfere. I have to be there. Please, if you have any mercy." "I can't, ma'am. Orders are—" "Then get word to someone who can help. A lawyer, a newspaperman, anyone." Clara gripped his sleeve. "They're going to murder an innocent man for the crime of saving my life. Could you live with that?" Williams was silent for a long moment. Then, "There's a lawyer in town, Josiah Fletcher. He's defended Indians before. Most folks hate him for it, but tell him, please, tell him Clara Whitmore needs his help urgently." The young private nodded once and hurried away. Clara spent that night in prayer to any deity who might listen. Taza's Apache spirits, her childhood god, the mountains themselves. Morning came too soon. Clara heard commotion in the fort, knew the trial was beginning without her. She paced her room like a caged animal, her baby turning restlessly. Then footsteps in the hall, voices arguing. Her door burst open. A tall, lean man with sharp gray eyes stood there, Mrs. Patterson fluttering behind him. "You can't just barge in here," she protested. "I'm Josiah Fletcher, ma'am," the man said to Clara, ignoring Mrs. Patterson. "I'm your attorney, if you'll have me, and as your attorney, I demand you be present at your husband's trial." "He's not her husband." "Mrs. Patterson shrieked. "That's for a court to decide, not you," Fletcher said coolly. "Mrs. Red Hawk, if you'll come with me—" Clara didn't need to be asked twice. She followed Fletcher out, still in her nightgown and robe, ignoring Mrs. Patterson's continued protests. The trial was being held in the fort's main building. It was packed with soldiers and townspeople, all eager to see the savage who dared touch a white woman hang. Clara's entrance caused a sensation. Whispers rippled through the crowd. She kept her head high, searching until she found Taza. He stood in chains before the colonel acting as judge, his face bearing new bruises but his posture unbowed. Their eyes met. The love and relief in his gaze gave her strength. "Your Honor," Fletcher said loudly, "I represent Mrs. Clara Redhawk, who has been illegally detained and prevented from testifying on her husband's behalf." "That woman is no wife," Morrison protested. "She's a victim of—" "I am Taza Redhawk's wife," Clara interrupted, her voice carrying through the room. "Married by Apache custom and my own free will. I am carrying his child, and I demand to be heard." The room erupted. The colonel banged for order. Through the chaos, Clara kept her eyes on Taza, drawing strength from his steady gaze. The battle for their lives had only just begun. Colonel Patterson banged his gavel repeatedly until the courtroom settled into uneasy silence. Clara stood tall despite her disheveled appearance, feeling every eye upon her. "Mrs. Whitmore," the colonel began, deliberately using her maiden name. "You've clearly been through an ordeal. Perhaps you should rest." "I'll rest when justice is done," Clara interrupted. "Mr. Fletcher is my attorney. I demand the right to testify." Fletcher stepped forward. "The law is clear. Colonel, a wife may testify on her husband's behalf." "She is not his wife," Morrison exploded. "Apache ceremonies have no legal standing. Then let us establish the facts," Fletcher said smoothly. "Mrs. Redhawk, please take the stand." Clara moved to the witness chair, her movements deliberate despite her exhaustion. She placed her hand on the Bible they offered, swearing to tell the truth. "State your name for the record." Fletcher began. "Clara Redhawk, formerly Clara Whitmore." "Tell us how you came to be with the Apache band." Clara recounted the bandit attack, her abandonment in the desert, Taza finding her near death. The courtroom listened in tense silence. "He could have left me to die," Clara said, looking directly at Taza. "Instead, he saved my life. When his people objected to harboring a white woman, Apache law demanded we marry or I be cast out. He chose to protect me. Protect you by forcing you into marriage?" Morrison interjected. "I was given a choice," Clara said firmly. "Marriage or leave. I chose to stay." "Because you were terrified, alone in a savage camp." "Because I was already beginning to see the honor in the man who'd saved me." Clara's voice grew stronger. "Taza Redhawk has shown me more respect and genuine care than I ever knew in civilized society." The crowd murmured. Several women looked scandalized. Fletcher continued his questioning, drawing out details of her life with the Apache, how she'd served as a healer, been accepted into the tribe, fallen genuinely in love with her husband. "And you carry his child willingly?" Fletcher asked gently. "Joyfully," Clara replied, hand on her belly. This child was conceived in love, not force. When the prosecution's turn came, Morrison attacked her viciously. "Isn't it true you were engaged to a Mr. Charles Brookstone in New York?" Clara's jaw tightened. "I was." "And he broke the engagement because of improper behavior on your part?" "Objection," Fletcher called. "Relevance goes to the witness's character," Morrison said smugly. "The colonel allowed it." Clara lifted her chin. "Charles broke our engagement to marry a wealthier woman. My only improper behavior was being too poor for his family's ambitions." "So you fled west in shame and threw yourself at the first savage who—" "I fled west for a teaching position." Clara's temper flared. "I was attacked by white bandits, left to die by white men who were supposed to protect me, and saved by an Apache warrior with more nobility than anyone in this room." The courtroom erupted again. Through it all, Taza watched her with such pride and love that Clara drew strength from it. The trial continued for hours. Witnesses were called, soldiers who'd found the camp, townspeople who spoke of Apache depredations. But Fletcher was clever, getting several to admit they'd never seen Taza commit any crimes, that the band had been peaceful. Finally, Clara was allowed to step down. As she passed Taza, their hands brushed briefly, a touch that sent whispers through the crowd but gave Clara courage. "The defense calls Private James Williams," Fletcher announced. The young soldier who'd helped Clara looked terrified as he took the stand. "Private Williams," Fletcher began. "You were present when Mrs. Redhawk was brought to the fort?" "Yes, sir." "What was her condition?" Williams glanced nervously at his superiors. "She was fighting, sir, trying to get to the Apache man, calling him her husband." "Did she appear to be a woman rescued from captivity?" A long pause. "No, sir. She appeared to be a woman being separated from someone she cared about," Morrison objected furiously. But the damage was done. Other witnesses followed, the Mexican trader Joaquin, who testified he'd seen Clara living freely with the band. Even a missionary who admitted that Apache marriages, while heathen, were considered binding by those who practiced them. As the sun began to set, Colonel Patterson called for closing arguments. Morrison went first, painting a lurid picture of white womanhood defiled, civilization under threat from savage practices. He called for Taza to hang as an example to others who might prey on innocent women. Fletcher's closing was masterful. "Gentlemen, we sit in judgment not of a crime, but of a love that challenges our assumptions. Mrs. Red Hawk was saved from death, protected from harm, and chose to remain with her protector. That her protector is Apache does not make him a criminal. That she chose to love him does not make her damaged. The only crime here is our prejudice." The colonel retired to consider. Clara was escorted to a small anteroom, still a prisoner, but Fletcher stayed with her. "Whatever happens," he said quietly. "You've been remarkably brave." "I'm terrified," Clara admitted. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. Mrs. Red Hawk, it's acting despite it." An hour passed, then two. Finally, they were summoned back. The courtroom was packed tighter than before. Taza stood straight despite his chains, his eyes finding Clara immediately. Colonel Patterson cleared his throat. "This case presents unique circumstances. While Apache marriage customs have no legal standing, neither is there clear evidence of kidnapping or assault. The witness testimony suggests Mrs. Whitmore remained with the accused voluntarily." Clara's heart leaped. "However," the colonel continued, "the accused is still an Apache warrior who refused to submit to reservation life. He will be transported to San Carlos Reservation immediately. As for Mrs. Whitmore—" "Red Hawk," Clara said firmly. The colonel's face darkened. "You remain a ward of the state until you deliver your child and can be properly evaluated. Perhaps then you'll remember your true place." "No!" Clara started forward, but soldiers held her back. "You can't separate us. I won't go to San Carlos without my wife." Taza struggled against his chains until a rifle butt to his kidney dropped him to his knees. "The savage will go where he's told," Morrison sneered. "And you, Mrs. Whitmore, will remain under protective custody." But as they dragged Taza away, something shifted in the courtroom. A woman in the back stood, elderly, wearing widow's black. "This is wrong," she said clearly. A man joined her. The woman chose her path. "Let her walk it." Another voice, then another. Not many, but enough to show that not everyone agreed with the verdict. That night, Clara was returned to her guarded room. But now she had an ally in Fletcher, who promised to file appeals, to contact newspapers back east. "This isn't over," he assured her. But Clara knew Taza would be gone by morning. Shipped to San Carlos, where disease and despair killed as surely as bullets, she had to act. Near midnight, she heard commotion outside, shouts, running feet. Her door burst open. Private Williams stood there, face white with fear or determination. "Ma'am, you need to come quick. There's a fire in the stockade." In the confusion, he didn't finish, just gestured urgently. Clara didn't hesitate. She followed Williams into chaos, soldiers running with water buckets, smoke billowing from the prison building. And there, in the shadows by the wall, a figure waited with horses. Taza, bloodied, clothes torn, but free. "How?" Clara breathed. "Some of my people escaped the roundup," Taza said quickly. "They started the fire, but we must go now." Williams pressed something into Clara's hand, her confiscated belongings, including her parents' photograph. "I never saw you," he said. "But ma'am, ride fast." Clara squeezed his hand gratefully, then let Taza lift her onto a horse despite her pregnant state. They rode out through the chaos, using the smoke and confusion as cover. Behind them, shouts arose as their escape was discovered. But they were already disappearing into the darkness, two shadows fleeing toward an uncertain freedom. They rode hard through the night, changing direction often to confuse pursuit. Taza led them through terrain Clara couldn't have navigated alone. Narrow canyons, hidden trails, paths that seemed to exist only in Apache memory. At dawn, They stopped to rest the horses at a hidden spring. Clara nearly fell from the saddle, exhaustion and her pregnancy taking their toll. "I'm sorry," Taza said, supporting her. "This is too hard for you in your condition. I'd ride through hell itself to stay with you," Clara replied fiercely. He kissed her then, pouring all his fear and love into the contact. When they parted, he touched her belly gently. "Our child will be born free," he promised. Not on a reservation, not in a white town that would scorn him. Free! They rode for 3 more days, stopping only when absolutely necessary. On the 4th dawn, they reached a place Clara had never seen, a valley so remote it seemed touched by gods. Ancient dwellings carved into cliff faces looked down on a stream lined with cottonwoods. "The old ones lived here," Taza explained. "My grandmother showed me this place before she died. Said to come here if the world became too small for Apache feet." Other figures emerged from the ruins, Apache who'd escaped the soldiers, including Ayana and, surprisingly, Kosheta. "Grandmother," Clara exclaimed, using the Apache term of respect. Kosheta smiled. "You think I would let soldiers cage me? I'm too old for their reservation life. Here, we live as we choose until the spirits call us home." The small band, perhaps 20 souls, had created a functioning camp in the hidden valley. They welcomed Clara and Taza with joy, tempered by the knowledge of what they'd all lost. Many were taken, Ayana told Clara sadly, my husband among them. But here, we survive. We remember. Clara threw herself into helping establish their new home. Her pregnancy made heavy work impossible, but she used her teaching skills, creating lessons for the children that preserved Apache knowledge, while also preparing them for a world that might someday find them. Summer passed into autumn. Clara's belly grew round and heavy. Taza hunted and protected their small band, while Clara served as healer and teacher. It was a hard life, but a free one. One night, as the first snows dusted the high peaks, Clara woke to wetness and cramping. Her time had come. The labor was long and difficult. Kosheta and Ayana attended her while Taza paced outside, his worry evident in the tight set of his shoulders. Clara bit leather to keep from screaming. Sound traveled far in the canyon, and they couldn't risk detection. "You are strong," Kosheta murmured, wiping sweat from Clara's brow. "Apache strong." Hours passed. The pain was unlike anything Clara had experienced. But finally, as dawn painted the cliffs rose and gold, a baby's cry split the air. "A son," Kosheta announced, placing the infant in Clara's exhausted arms. A bridge between worlds, as his father dreamed. The baby was perfect. Taza's dark hair and high cheekbones, but Clara's blue eyes. Looking at him, Clara felt her heart expand beyond anything she'd thought possible. Taza was allowed in then. The fierce warrior fell to his knees beside them, tears streaming down his face as he touched his son with trembling fingers. "He's beautiful," he whispered. "What shall we name him?" Clara thought of all they'd endured, all they'd sacrificed for this moment. "Samuel," she said. "Samuel Redhawk. It means heard by God. Our prayers were heard. Samuel Taza Redhawk." Taza corrected gently. "So he carries both his peoples within his name." The baby's naming ceremony blended Apache tradition with Clara's Christian heritage. Kosheta blessed him with sacred pollen while Clara whispered prayers her mother had taught her. The small band celebrated quietly but joyfully. New life was hope made flesh. As Clara recovered, she often sat at the valley's edge, nursing Samuel while watching the sun paint the desert in impossible colors. She thought of the schoolroom in Fort Defiance where she was supposed to be teaching, of the life she'd planned that had nothing to do with hidden valleys and fugitive freedom. "Regrets?" Taza asked one evening, reading her mood as he always could. Clara looked at her husband, their son, the small community they'd built from loss and determination. "Never," she said, meaning it completely. "I was meant to find you in that desert. Everything else was just the path that led me home." Winter came harsh and deep, but they survived. They had food stored, warm shelters, and most importantly, each other. Clara taught the children their letters using charcoal on flat stones. Taza and the other men hunted and stood guard. The women kept the old traditions alive through story and song. It wasn't the life Clara had imagined as a young woman in New York. It was harder, more dangerous, stripped of comfort and security. But it was also more real than anything she'd known. Love proven through sacrifice. Family forged from choice rather than blood. Freedom that cost everything but was worth the price. On quiet nights, nursing Samuel while Taza slept beside them, Clara would think of her old self with something like pity. That woman had been so concerned with propriety, with what others thought, with fitting into a world that ultimately didn't want her. This Clara, wife of Taza Redhawk, mother of Samuel, adopted daughter of the Apache, knew who she was down to her bones. She'd been transformed by desert and mountain, by love and loss, into something stronger and truer than she'd ever dreamed possible. The world outside their valley grew ever smaller for the free Apache. But here, in this hidden place, they carved out a space where two worlds could meet in a child's blue eyes and Apache features, where love transcended the boundaries others would impose. Clara had crossed a continent searching for a new life. 3 years passed in the hidden valley. Samuel grew from infant to toddler, running on sturdy legs through the camp, chattering in a mix of Apache and English that made everyone smile. He was the bridge his father had envisioned, equally comfortable with Cocheta's traditional stories and Clara's alphabet songs. The community had grown too. Other fugitives found their way to the valley, Apache who'd escaped the reservations, Mexican families fleeing violence, even a few white outlaws who preferred freedom to civilization's chains. It was an unlikely gathering, but shared hardship forged unexpected bonds. Clara had established a proper school in one of the ancient ruins, teaching children and adults alike. Reading and writing in English, yes, but also preserving Apache language and Mexican Spanish. Mathematics scratched on flat stones, history told through multiple perspectives. You create warriors of the mind. Taza said one evening, watching her teach a mixed group of children, as important as any other kind. But their peace couldn't last forever. Scouts reported increased military patrols in the surrounding areas. The army hadn't forgotten about the Apache who'd escaped, or the white woman who'd chosen to remain with them. One spring morning, a lone rider approached the valley, not a soldier, but a familiar face, Joaquin, the Mexican trader, looking older and bearing troubling news. They know you are somewhere in these mountains, he told the gathered council. A new colonel at Fort Defiance, Colonel Brennan. He says he will find every free Apache and the white woman who shames her race. Let him come, growled Claw, who'd recovered from his war wound. These mountains have swallowed armies before. But Cocheta shook her head. We cannot fight the whole white army. We must think of the children. Clara felt Taza tense beside her. Samuel played at their feet, unaware of the danger being discussed. There is more. Joaquin continued reluctantly. They offer reward, much money for information about Senora Clara. And he paused. They say if she comes forward herself, they will leave this band in peace. Lies, Taza said immediately. They promise peace and deliver bullets. But Clara's mind was working. What exactly do they offer? Joaquin looked uncomfortable. Safe passage for the band to Mexico. Papers saying they will not pursue, but only if you return voluntarily. The council erupted in argument. Some said it was a trap. Others wondered if it might be their only chance to save the children from eventual discovery and slaughter. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She walked to the valley's edge, looking out at the star-filled desert. Taza found her there. You are thinking of going, he said, not a question. If it would save everyone, no. His voice was granite. We have discussed this. I will not lose you again. And I won't watch our son grow up always running, always hiding. Clara turned to face him. What life is that for Samuel, for any of the children? A free life, hard, but free. Free until they find us. And they will, Taza. You know they will. The world grows smaller every year. He pulled her against him, and she felt him tremble. There must be another way. But as days passed and scout reports grew more troubling, Clara made her decision. She wrote 2 letters, One to Colonel Brennan, one to Josiah Fletcher. The traitor Joaquin, though reluctant, agreed to deliver them on his next trip to the settlements. She told no one else, especially not Taza. He would stop her, and she couldn't bear to see his face when he learned of her plan. 2 weeks later, Joaquin returned with responses. Fletcher wrote that he'd been working on her case, that newspapers back east had taken interest in the story of the Apache princess, as they dramatically called her. Public opinion was divided but shifting. If she came forward now, publicly, he believed he could use the attention to secure real guarantees for the band. Colonel Brennan's letter was shorter, officially agreeing to safe passage for the band to Mexico if Clara surrendered herself. That night, Clara nursed Samuel for what might be the last time, memorizing his sweet face, the weight of him in her arms, while the camp slept. She dressed in the white woman's clothes Joaquin had brought, a simple cotton dress that felt foreign after years in doeskin. She left 3 letters on her sleeping mat, one for Samuel, to be read when he was older, one for Kosheda and the band, and one for Taza. "My beloved," she wrote to her husband, "I go not because I love you less, but because I love you and our son more than my own freedom. Trust Fletcher. He will help. Raise our son to be proud of both his heritages. Tell him his mother loved him enough to give him a chance at a life without running. I carry you in my heart always. Your Clara." She kissed Taza's sleeping face, touched Samuel's soft hair one last time, and slipped from the wickiup. Joaquin waited with horses at the valley entrance. "You are certain?" "Senora." "No," Clara admitted. "But I'm going anyway." They rode through the night. At dawn, Clara looked back once at the hidden valley that had been her true home. Then she turned her face toward Fort Defiance and whatever awaited her there. The sensation her arrival caused exceeded anything Clara had imagined. Word had spread somehow, perhaps Fletcher's doing, and journalists waited alongside soldiers. As she rode through the fort's gates, sitting straight despite her exhaustion, cameras flashed and questions flew. "Mrs. Whitmore, is it true you married an Apache savage? How did you survive your ordeal? Where is the half-breed child?" Clara said nothing until she stood before Colonel Brennan. He was younger than Patterson, with cold gray eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Whitmore, you've caused the United States Army considerable trouble." "Mrs. Red Hawk," Clara corrected calmly. "And I've come to end that trouble. You have your word to honor. Colonel, safe passage for my husband's people. Assuming they take it, savages aren't known for recognizing good opportunities." Clara bit back her response. She needed this man's cooperation. What followed were days of interrogation disguised as interviews. Where was the band hiding? How many warriors? What weapons did they possess? To every question about location or defenses, Clara responded the same way. "I came forward to spare them pursuit. I won't betray them now." Fletcher arrived on the 3rd day, armed with writs and newspaper clippings. The story of Clara's sacrifice, leaving her child and husband to save them, had captured public imagination. Letters poured in, some condemning her, others calling her a heroine. "You've become a symbol," Fletcher told her during one of their meetings. "The question is, a symbol of what?" Clara was kept under house arrest, more comfortable than before, but still a prisoner. She was allowed to write letters, though they were read by others first. She sent one to Taza through Joaquin, telling him to take the bargain, to go to Mexico where Samuel could grow up free. His response came 2 weeks later, delivered by Ayana, who'd somehow slipped past the fort's guards. "He says to tell you he will not go to Mexico without you," Ayana reported, tears in her eyes. "He says a life of freedom means nothing if you are caged. Samuel cries for his mother." Those words nearly broke Clara's resolve, but she held firm. "Tell him I'll find a way to join them, but they must go now, while the promise of safe passage holds." Summer turned to autumn. Clara learned from Fletcher that the band had finally accepted the inevitable, beginning their journey to Mexico under military escort to the border. She received no word from Taza, and his silence cut deeper than any blade. Then came unexpected news. President Hayes, responding to public pressure and editorials in Eastern newspapers, had agreed to review her case personally. Fletcher was jubilant. "We argue that your marriage, while performed under Apache custom, represents a form of common law union that should be recognized. That you were not kidnapped but rescued, not corrupted but educated in a different way of life." The hearing in Washington took place in November. Clara traveled under guard, stared at like a circus attraction at every stop. In the Capitol, she faced a panel of stern men who questioned every aspect of her life with the Apache. But Clara had learned to be a warrior in her own way. She spoke eloquently of Apache culture, of their humanity and dignity. She described Taza not as a savage, but as a man of honor who'd saved her life and shown her a love more real than anything civilization offered. "Gentlemen," she concluded, "you speak of the Apache as if they need to be civilized, but I tell you, it was they who civilized me. They taught me that true worth isn't measured in wealth or status, but in how we care for our community. My husband and son are in Mexico now, exiled from their homeland because of policies that refuse to see them as human. I ask not for your approval, but for the freedom to join my family. Let me live with the choices I've made." The panel deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the Chief Justice spoke carefully. "Mrs. Redhawk, your case presents unprecedented circumstances. While we cannot formally recognize Apache marriage customs, neither can we deny that you appear to have entered into your arrangement voluntarily. You are not charged with any crime. Therefore, you are free to go where you will." Clara nearly collapsed with relief. Free. After all these months. Truly free. But freedom brought new challenges. The journey to Mexico required money she didn't have, and traveling alone as a woman was dangerous. Fletcher helped arrange passage with a group of missionaries heading to Sonora, though they looked at her with barely concealed disgust. The journey took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of wondering if Taza would forgive her choice, if Samuel would remember her, if the band had found safety in Mexico. She finally reached the village where the band had settled, a dusty collection of adobes in the Sonoran desert. As she climbed from the wagon, she saw familiar faces emerging from doorways. Ayana cried out in joy. Kosheta, moving slowly but still strong, came forward with tears on her weathered cheeks. And then Taza was there, Samuel in his arms. Her husband's face was thinner, marked by months of grief, but his eyes held such love and relief that Clara felt her knees weaken. Samuel had grown, nearly 4 now, with Clara's blue eyes bright in his sun-bronzed face. He studied her solemnly for a moment, then reached out his arms. "Mama," he said clearly. "Mama, come home." Clara sobbed as she gathered her son close, breathing in his little boy's scent, feeling the solid reality of him. Taza's arms came around them both, and for a long moment they simply stood there, a family reunited against all odds. That night, in the adobe house the village had given them, Clara and Taza lay entwined while Samuel slept peacefully nearby. They had talked for hours about her choice to leave, his anger and understanding, the long months of separation that had tested but not broken their bond. "I thought I had lost you forever," Taza admitted. "When your letter came, I wanted to ride back, to drag you from that fort. I would have done the same if our positions were reversed." Clara said, "We do what we must for our children." "Our children," he repeated softly. "Samuel asked every day when you would return. I told him stories of his brave mother who loved him enough to ensure his freedom." Clara kissed him deeply, tasting tears and promise. They made love with desperate tenderness, rediscovering each other, reclaiming what separation had tried to steal. Later, as Taza slept, Clara stepped outside to look at the stars. The Sonoran desert was different from their mountain valley, hotter, harsher, foreign. But it was freedom, purchased with sacrifice and pain. She thought of the woman she'd been, boarding that stagecoach in Tucson so long ago, that Clara could never have imagined this life. Wife to an Apache warrior, mother to a child of 2 worlds, teacher to a community of outcasts and survivors. The desert had taken everything she thought she was and forged her into something stronger. She'd lost one home, but gained another. She'd surrendered comfort but found purpose. In the house, Samuel cried out in his sleep. Clara went to him, gathering him close, singing the Apache lullaby Cocheta had taught her. Her son settled, murmuring "Mama" contentedly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. They were exiles in a foreign land, unwelcome refugees building new lives from scratch. But they were together. They were free. And Clara knew with bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had witnessed her transformation from frightened Eastern teacher to Apache wife and mother. Clara Redhawk smiled, her son in her arms, her husband nearby, her chosen family sleeping safely around her. She'd traveled far to find her home, but every step, every loss, every sacrifice, every small victory had led her here, and here, in this dusty Mexican village with her mixed band of Apache, Mexican, and other displaced souls, she would build something new, a place where Samuel could grow up proud of all he was, where the old ways could be preserved while adapting to a changing world, where love transcended the boundaries others would impose. Clara went back inside, settling beside Taza, Samuel between them. As sleep claimed her, she thought she heard the desert wind singing, not the threatening voice that had nearly killed her years ago, but a welcoming song. The courtroom in Tucson was packed to capacity, journalists from as far as New York and San Francisco cramming into every available space. 5 years had passed since Clara's reunion with her family in Mexico, and now she stood at another crossroads, fighting a different kind of battle. Mrs. Redhawk, the judge began, peering over his spectacles. You petitioned this court for something unprecedented, the right to return to the United States with your Apache husband and mixed-blood son, and to establish a school for indigenous children. Many would call this proposal radical. Clara stood tall in her carefully chosen dress, a blend of Eastern fashion and Apache influence that had become her signature. Your Honor, what is radical about education? What is dangerous about teaching children to read and write while respecting their heritage? Beside her, Josiah Fletcher, grayer now but still sharp, nodded approval at her measured tone. This hearing had been years in the making, sparked by changing policies and Clara's carefully cultivated correspondence with reform-minded politicians and educators. The danger, Prosecutor Jameson interjected, lies in perpetuating savage customs. These children need civilization, not encouragement in their heathen ways. I've lived among the Apache for 8 years. Clara responded calmly. I've seen their savage customs, respect for elders, care for children, harmony with the land. Perhaps it's our civilization that could learn from them. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. In the gallery, Clara spotted familiar faces. Joaquin, who'd become a tireless advocate for their cause. Mrs. Patterson, surprisingly, who'd had a change of heart after her own son died in an Indian war she'd come to see as senseless. Even Private Williams, now Sergeant Williams, discharged from the Army and working as a teacher himself. But most importantly, she saw Taza and Samuel. Her husband sat straight and dignified, his hair now touched with premature gray from their years of struggle. Samuel, 9 years old and brilliant, watched everything with those startling blue eyes that marked him as between worlds. Fletcher called witness after witness. Former students Clara had taught in Mexico testified about her methods, how she preserved Apache language and stories while teaching English literacy, how she made mathematics relevant to daily life, how she taught history from multiple perspectives. She taught us we could be proud of who we are while learning new ways, testified Maria, a young Apache woman who'd gone on to become a nurse. She showed us education didn't mean erasure. The prosecution fought back, bringing witnesses who spoke of the danger of educated Indians, the threat to social order, the impropriety of a white woman advocating for Apache ways. During a recess, Samuel tugged on Clara's sleeve. Mama, why do they hate us? Clara knelt to his level. They don't hate us, my love. They fear what they don't understand. That's why education matters. It replaces fear with knowledge. Is that why you left us that time? To make them understand? The old pain flickered. Yes, sometimes we must fight battles away from those we love to protect them. When court resumed, an unexpected witness took the stand. Kosheta, ancient now but still formidable. She spoke through an interpreter, her words carrying the weight of decades. This woman came to us dying in the desert. We could have let her die. Many whites had let us die. But my grandson chose mercy, chose life. She became one of us, not through capture, but through courage. She birthed children, healed sickness, taught our young. She is Apache in heart, if not in blood. To deny her is to deny the possibility that different peoples can become family. Even hardened journalists seemed moved by the old woman's dignity. The hearing stretched for 3 days. Finally, Clara was called to make her closing statement. She stood, thinking of all that had brought her to this moment. The failed engagement that had driven her west. The bandits who'd left her to die. Taza finding her in the desert. Their forced marriage becoming real love. The birth of Samuel. The years of running and hiding. The sacrifice of separation. The joy of reunion. The years in Mexico building a community from scattered refugees. Gentlemen, she began. 8 years ago, I was Clara Whitmore, a proper Eastern lady with proper Eastern prejudices. The desert stripped that woman away and rebuilt her as Clara Redhawk, wife, mother, teacher, bridge between worlds. You speak of civilization as if it's a treasure only certain people possess. But I've learned civilization isn't about the color of one's skin or the language one speaks first. It's about how we treat each other, how we pass knowledge to our children, how we build communities from difference rather than sameness. My husband saved my life and showed me a love I'd never imagined possible. My son carries the best of 2 heritages in his heart. The children I've taught have gone on to become nurses, craftsmen, teachers themselves, contributing to society while maintaining their identity. I stand before you asking not for charity, but for justice. Let us return. Let us establish a school that honors all traditions while preparing children for the modern world. Let us prove that America can be large enough for all its peoples. She sat down to absolute silence. Then, sudden applause from the gallery before the judge banged for order. The deliberation took only an hour. When the judge returned, his expression was unreadable. This court, he began slowly, has wrestled with questions that go to the heart of what America claims to be. Are we a nation that demands conformity, or one that can embrace difference? Can education preserve culture while promoting progress? He looked directly at Clara. Mrs. Redhawk, your petition is granted. You and your family may return to the territory of New Mexico, where you may establish your school under the supervision of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, though I suspect you'll challenge that supervision at every turn. The courtroom erupted. Clara felt her knees buckle, but Taza was there, solid and real. Catching her, Samuel whooped with joy, his child's voice cutting through the chaos. "We're going home," he asked. "We're going home," Clara confirmed, tears streaming down her face. 6 months later, the Redhawk School opened in a valley not far from where Clara had first lived with the Apache. It wasn't their hidden valley, that secret she would take to her grave, but it was beautiful land donated by a sympathetic rancher who'd been moved by their story. The opening ceremony blended traditions, Apache blessings mixed with Christian prayers. Government officials sat uncomfortably next to Apache elders. Children of all backgrounds, Apache, Mexican, even some poor white families, lined up to enroll. Clara stood before them all, Taza beside her, Samuel translating her words into Apache for those who needed it. "This school stands for a simple truth," she said, "that every child deserves to learn, to grow, to become all they're capable of being without sacrificing who they are. Here, we'll study mathematics and Apache astronomy. We'll read Shakespeare and hear the stories of Coyote. We'll learn to write in English while preserving the languages of our grandparents." The first years were hard. Government inspectors criticized their unconventional methods. Local townspeople muttered about Indian lovers and race mixing. Funding was always scarce, but the children thrived. They scored well on standard examinations while maintaining their cultural knowledge. Graduates went on to colleges, to trades, to teaching positions of their own, and slowly, minds began to change. Samuel grew into a remarkable young man, equally at home in a university library or on horseback in the mountains. At 18, he was accepted to Harvard, the first Apache student they'd ever admitted. "I'll come back," he promised his parents. "I'll learn their law and use it to protect our people." And he did, becoming one of the first Native American lawyers to argue before the Supreme Court, fighting for treaty rights and educational reform. Clara's hair turned silver, and Taza's face lined with years. But their love only deepened. They raised 3 more children: Maria, who became a doctor; Thomas, who preserved Apache stories in written form for the first time; and little Anna, who inherited her mother's teaching gift and eventually took over the school. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Taza took Clara back to the storm-watching ledge in the hidden valley. The band had long since scattered, but the place remained untouched, sacred. "Do you remember?" he asked. "When I brought you here the first time?" "I remember everything," Clara said. "How young we were, how impossible it all seemed. You saved us all," Taza said quietly. "Not just from the soldiers, but from despair. You showed us we could adapt without disappearing. We saved each other," Clara corrected. Echoing words from long ago. They watched the sunset paint the desert in familiar golds and purples. In the distance, a train whistle sounded, the modern world encroaching even here. But the mountains stood eternal, and the wind still sang Apache songs for those who knew how to listen. Clara thought of her legacy, not just the school that now had branches in 3 states, not just the children who'd gone on to bridge worlds, but the proof that love could transcend every barrier humans tried to erect. "I would do it all again," she said softly. "Every hardship, every sacrifice, every moment of joy and pain, to be here with you, to have built what we built. I would choose this path 1,000 times." Taza pulled her close as the first stars appeared. "My star in darkness," he murmured, using the endearment from their early days. "You still light my way." They returned to their home near the school as the moon rose full and bright. Their children and grandchildren would visit soon for the autumn harvest ceremony, a tradition maintained even as the world modernized around them. Clara paused at their door, looking back at the mountains that had shaped her, the desert that had tested her, the sky that had witnessed her transformation. She'd begun as Clara Whitmore, frightened and heartbroken, fleeing a failed life. She'd become Clara Redhawk, warrior in her own right, fighting battles with words and wisdom instead of weapons. She'd proven that people could change, that cultures could blend without losing their essence, that love could conquer fear and prejudice. The desert had taken a proper Eastern lady and given back something entirely new, neither fully white nor Apache, but something unique and necessary. A bridge, a teacher, a mother of many children, biological and chosen, a wife whose love had survived every test. As she entered her home, Clara smiled. She could hear Taza starting the evening fire, smell the sage and pinon that meant safety and belonging. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. But tonight, she was simply Clara Redhawk, home from her long journey, exactly where she belonged. The woman who'd once feared the desert now knew its every mood. The teacher who'd come to impose one culture had learned to celebrate many. The bride who'd married from necessity had discovered a love deeper than oceans. In the flickering firelight, surrounded by the artwork of her children and students, photographs of graduates alongside traditional Apache crafts, Clara opened her journal to write. "Today marks another small victory in our long struggle for understanding. 3 more schools have agreed to adopt our methods. Samuel argues a case next month that could secure greater autonomy for tribal education. Maria has delivered her 100th baby, bringing traditional birthing wisdom to modern medicine. The work continues, as it must. But tonight, I am not thinking of the work. I am thinking of a frightened girl dying in the desert, and the warrior who chose to save her. I am thinking of all the small choices that led to this moment, each one seeming insignificant at the time, but together weaving a life I could never have imagined." The desert taught me that we must sometimes be stripped bare to discover who we truly are, that love can bloom in the harshest ground, that home is not where we come from, but where we choose to plant our hearts. I chose to plant mine in Apache soil, watered with tears and joy in equal measure. And from that planting has grown a garden, my children, my students, my community. A garden where Apache roses grow alongside Eastern flowers, where all are welcome if they come with respect and open hearts. I am Clara Redhawk. I am teacher, mother, wife, and bridge. I am exactly who I was meant to be. She closed the journal and joined Taza by the fire. Outside, coyotes called to the moon. Inside, love wrapped around them like a blanket, warm and enduring as the mountains themselves. The girl who'd fled heartbreak had found her heart's true home. The journey had been longer and stranger than any story, but it had led her exactly where she belonged, in the arms of a man who'd saved her in every way a person could be saved, in a life that honored both tradition and transformation. Clara Redhawk smiled, content at last. The desert had made her, and she had made herself, into something altogether remarkable. Proof that love knows no boundaries, that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes getting lost is the only way to find yourself. The fire crackled, the stars wheeled overhead, and in a small corner of the American West, two souls who'd found each other against all odds continued their dance of difference and devotion, writing with their lives a story of what America could be when fear gave way to love. Thank you so much for joining me on Clara and Taza's incredible journey through the Wild West. Their story reminds us that love can transcend any boundary, and that understanding between different peoples is always possible. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share your location in the comments so we can connect with fellow Wild West romance lovers around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more passionate tales of love and adventure on the frontier. What did you think of Clara's transformation? Would you have made the same choices? Share your thoughts below.